Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and I'm very pleased to introduce my fellow director and fellow host, Philip Hesketh, and our guests, who I'll be saying a little more about in a moment, Greg Hunt from Billericay, and Colm Brannigan from Guelph, near Toronto in Canada, who's got out of his bed a little early to be with us today. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, everyone. We are recording this session. We would like to deal with questions on the way through, so please use the Q&A function if you have questions, and we will deal with those on the way through or at the end as you prefer. We are recording, so you're invited either to put your name with your question or anon is perfectly fine. The recording and the slides and some other materials will be on our website soon. Give us a couple of days or so because it takes that to get them together. So we can kick off now with our look at AI and how it is already playing a part in our lives, and how it may do so in the near future. We'll take a shot at looking at that. Our next webinar, just a quick advert and a save the date, 10th of December, we should be looking at court orders for mediation, and some news there we have to impart, and you're very welcome to join us on that occasion also. So to say a little more about our guests, Greg, as I mentioned, is based in Billericay. In addition to the words you see there, he is the founder of Business AI Studio, trading as Hunt AI, where technology meets professional education. And he also hosts a couple of podcasts, one of which is Brainstorm, Brain AI Brainstorm, the Hunt AI podcast about how AI is reshaping work, creativity, and communication. Colm, as I said, is joining us from Canada this morning, where he lives and has his practice. And in addition to his words, I can tell you that he is deeply engaged in advancing online dispute resolution and exploring the role of AI in ADR. He is the co-author of ODR, Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow, a foundational text on technology in dispute resolution. And so we have some leading gurus, if I can call them that, who know quite a lot about dispute resolution and tech and AI, and have been in the field for many years. Really pleased to have both of you with us and looking forward to your insights. So a few context points. AI hardly needs any context today, with it's hitting our inboxes, our podcasts, our news and TV news on a regular, daily, hourly basis. Some stuff which is more pertinent to us. A quote here from Sir Geoffrey Voss, who was not only talking about having an AI judge, but suggesting that personal injury damages may be an early target for AI. The task would take AI a couple of minutes, he suggests. Is that oversimplifying personal injury, or is that for real? And also on the question of whether an AI will replace judges, here are some words from Richard Susskind suggesting that may well be the case, but also looking at low-value disputes, suggesting that before 2030, people will just upload their information to a comfortingly branded AI system and get the conclusion on which they're happy to rely. Is that coming down the track? If and when and how? These are some random stats from legal journals and tech reports I've looked at. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they all demonstrate why AI is on the agenda of many people, and certainly many lawyers. Coming to our question today, we're looking at AI generally, but we're also trying to put a focus on how it's going to be used and how it is being used by litigators and mediators in PI and ClinNeg claims in particular. And as I mentioned, also looking forward to how that may be used. So with that, I think just to remind you, please do put questions into the Q&A button. We're very happy to hear from you with with questions, and we'll try and monitor those and deal with those as we go through, or have a session at the end as things progress. So that's my intro. Thank you very much. And I'm now going to turn over to Greg. Greg, you have been looking at this subject in many ways for some time now. So let us have your thoughts, please, on what's taking your attention in terms of tools in this area, and what you're seeing and where you think it's going to go.
Thanks, Tim, and hello, everyone. It's really good to be here. So let's start with a quick explanation of how I got into AI. I'm not a techie person. I've never been a techie person. I'm the sort of person who just tends to think, oh, that's a good idea. I'll have a go at doing it. And during COVID, I found that I was having to get in front of the camera a lot more to record myself doing things for videos for training courses. And I didn't like it. I don't particularly like looking at myself. Like most people, the sound of your own voice can be quite boring to yourself. So I was looking for alternatives, and I found something called Synthesia, which was an AI startup really at the time that allowed you to do avatar videos. So I started putting together some avatar videos to use on training courses and on on-demand courses. And then people started saying to me, Greg, where did you get that video done? It's brilliant. And well, I did it myself. And then they were asking me to do them for them. And I thought, well, that doesn't really fit into the context of what Hunt ADR is about. So I better start a new business that sort of concentrates more on AI and see what I can do in the AI field. And from that, just really gained an interest and like to experiment with different tools. So Synthesia is something I still use now. In fact, I was using it. I've got a video sort of rendering now as we speak, because I'm just relaunching our training page. And funny enough, I've just had an argument with ChatGPT about it, because it was hallucinating, or it was hoodwinking me about something that it said it had done for me, and I know it hadn't. So I was telling it off in that conversation. And I think that's part of what we're going to be looking at today, I suppose, all of us, is can you really trust AI, and how much should you trust it, and what should you rely on your own experience and expertise and knowledge to do, rather than just taking it for word. So I've tried lots of different types of platforms. Synthesia is more about generating video content, but I sort of early adopter of ChatGPT. I've tried Gemini, I've tried Claude, I've tried DeepSeek, I've tried lots of different ones, but I always end up going back to ChatGPT. And for me, that's the best one, the one I'm most comfortable with, and the one that I've been using quite a lot and developing quite a lot in my own business over the last year or so in particular. I like the way you can train it to do what you want it to do. But I think the overarching angle on all of this is that use it as a assistant, or as a what's the word? An intern to help you to develop things, but don't take its word for anything. You've got to check everything with AI. I've recently discovered using it for emails. And in the past, I was thinking, well, this is rubbish. If I copy an email into ChatGPT and then ask it to draft a reply, it's just rubbish. There's no point doing it. But now you can actually link to your Outlook account, which also has an effect on confidentiality. This is on a business subscription, and playing around with it, the quality is now really good, and it saves a lot of time. So on the train, I can say, just got an email from Tim Wallis, draft me a reply. And it knows already the sort of language I use, my tone. So it won't say, Dear Mr. Wallis, it'll say, Hi, Tim, that sort of thing. And it just saves me a lot of time. Then when I get back to the office, I can edit that, always edit it, never allow anything to send anything in your name without being able to edit it. I also spent a lot of time, there's a lady called Sabrina Romanov in the States, who basically has made it her goal to provide free AI tutorials to 1 million people within a small time period. And she's got some amazing tools. There's a tool called Blotato So if you want to do videos or write blogs or generate articles or things like that, Blutato is really good. And it means that you can post them to lots of different platforms. And she gives a lot of advice and guidance on there as well, a lot of it for free. There is a paid subscription if you want to generate a lot of stuff, but there is a free account, and I can send information on that. Another one that I don't use yet, but when we do the AI for Mediators course, Kelly, who does it with me, always does this session, is LM Notebook, which is really looks powerful. And it really looks like a good tool to help you to prepare for mediation, to order documentation, to understand what the parties are trying to put over. So that's a bit of an outline of the journey and some of the tools that I use. I mean, predominantly I am using ChatGPT the most. I have got a paid subscription. It is costing me money, but I see that as having someone, I would have to pay someone thousands of pounds a year to get out of them what ChatGPT has given me. And as a small business, I haven't got that money. So I feel like it's leveling the playing field a little bit for me with some of the larger businesses that we compete with, because actually I now have got more expertise at my fingertips. I'm just going to show you some slides. What we've been doing is talking a lot about mediation, talking about a lot about whether mediators should be using AI, how they want to use AI, and how they are using AI. And today, as we speak, it's just published on LinkedIn. I've got together some real insights from real mediators about what they're doing in the AI field. So I wanted to give you a preview of the preview. Now, here's just a few slides just to whet your appetite a bit. So AI for mediators, what our practitioners are really doing. And as I say, this is information we've gathered from questionnaires from real mediators. So what do mediators want from AI? Well, mediators see the biggest potential and where they're using it the most at the moment in drafting agreements. So the mediation agreement, potentially the settlement agreement as well is being drafted using AI. Sometimes by the lawyers in the room. So these aren't necessarily tools that only the mediators use, and these are being used by lawyers in mediation, using AI to help them to draft things like the settlement agreement. Summarizing submissions, Notebook LM, as I said, is a great example of what you can do to help summarize submissions, hyperlink, find that information without having to sort of bookmark things all over the place. Streamlining admin and onboarding, something again, if you're a mediator that's been appointed by the parties and not through a third party, then you have to do a lot of the admin yourself. And sort of get the information out to the parties, gather the information back from them, and AI can really help you to do that. And it can bring clarity to complex issues. You know, you can say to AI, here's a document that's been supplied by the parties, taking consideration of anything to do with confidentiality. Explain it to me in more simple language. You can even say, explain it to me like I'm doing GCSE English. And get it to sort of tone it down so you can understand some complex issues a bit more. Always bearing in mind that you've still got to sense check anything that it tells you. Okay, not just take it verbatim, take it for granted immediately that its interpretation is right. You still have to sense check this, use your own experience and expertise to do that. Also in support of preparation. So this is where mediators seem to be using AI the most at the moment. It can help you to digest long documents. So I'm one of those mediators who says to parties, don't send me loads of information. I don't need to have loads of information. I'll get the relevant information from you in the mediation, but send me an overview of the dispute and any important information you need me to know. But you still get long lists of documents, and AI can really help you to distill them down. It can create timelines and chronologies, which are really useful. And as I've said, it can help you draft and personalize the mediation paperwork that you need to deal with before the mediation starts. In the exploration and negotiation phases of mediation, the overwhelming view on those who have completed our questionnaire on this is something I find really good, and I think is a good, healthy way of looking at AI. It's a thinking partner in the room. So it's not replacing you, it's not telling you what to do, it's not giving you stupid ideas that you're just going to accept. It's helping you to think and plan. And that's something really useful in the mediation context. It can help you, it can help the parties reframe issues in more neutral language. It can help you structure your opening sessions with the parties. It can generate helpful questions, and it can support option building and help with reality testing. And what we're finding is that this isn't just all about the mediator using AI for these things, the parties are using it. So one of the reasons we started our AI course was because it's not necessarily just about showing mediators how to use AI. It's about the fact that they need to understand about it because the parties are using it. Whether those parties are sort of just the business side of people or whether it's the lawyers in the room as well, parties are using AI. I have had one mediator say to me that they were asked by a party why they were doing something in a particular way because ChatGPT had explained they should be doing it in a different way. Okay, so you're almost having to negotiate with the parties about the fact, well, rely on me and my experience. You appointed me based on that. So let's try and do this the way that I think is best rather than what ChatGPT is telling you that might be the best way of doing it. Some excitements in inverted commas and concerns that mediators have got. Well, time saving is very significant. The opportunity to produce clearer documentation in mediation and having that thinking partner. It's almost like you've got an assistant mediator with you at all times you can just ask a question to. And you need to be very careful what you're asking it. And we have something for our trainees called Medi, and Tim's seen this as Medi Lite, we call it for people who've been on the CPD course, where I've actually written a custom GPT where people can put questions in and get answers that I would give them. So it's not drawing it from the wider internet, it's basically based on information that I've put into it. So not meaning to make that sound like it's amazing because it's me, but I'm an experienced mediator who's been doing it for a long time. So if you had access to something like Medi, you'd in effect be getting my view on how to handle a particular thing. Areas of concern, I mean, the usual ones, which are very serious: confidentiality, accuracy, over-reliance, and potentially one day losing the human element. And I'm of the view that that day will come. We're not there yet, but I think somewhere down the line, I'm thinking now I've got 10 years left before I retire. Let's hope it's not in the next 10 years. But I think at some point we will find that a lot of what we do now is actually going to be done by AI. So we need to be aware of that and start to have a presence to be able to give ourselves a future career alongside AI rather than ignoring it. And well done to everyone who's here because you're making that first step. So why it matters now? Well, mediators are exploring AI because it saves time, improves clarity, strengthens preparation, but again, only when it's used safely and professionally. Tim's allowed me to sort of push our AI for Mediators course a little bit. So the next dates are the 15th of December and the 21st of January. It's a 4-hour course online, and the price is £99. But we're offering it for £50 to anyone who's attending this today. All you need to do is go on to LinkedIn, subscribe to Gregonomics, which is my newsletter, and give it a like, and then DM me to tell me that you've done that, and I'll send you a code, which then gives you access to AI for Mediators for £50, and that's for the 15th of December or the 21st of January. So you can choose either of those courses. You just need to have done that by 5 o'clock on Friday in order to get the discount. And then finally on this, I've done a preview report, so a bit more detail than what I've just done now in today's edition of Gregonomics. And then on Friday, I'll be publishing the full report in terms of what mediators are telling us in relation to how they're using AI. So I think I've probably spoken enough in the time allocation for now. I'm sure if there are any questions, Tim will give some time for us to answer them later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and please, members of the audience, do put your questions in Q&A at any time. Greg, just before we move on, a couple of points. Firstly, I did attend your course. I was very pleased to do so, and I found it very informative. So I do recommend that. You mentioned confidentiality as one of the serious concerns, of course. Just the practical application of that, you were talking about getting emails answered and connecting ChatGPT to Outlook, and the immediate question goes on to confidentiality. And I think you mentioned you got a business subscription.
Yeah.
How does that help you in terms of confidentiality?
Well, it's changed things quite a lot actually. And if you remember, for when you were on the course, Tim, I was saying never ever trust AI with anything that's confidential. And really you've got to take any confidential information out before you can sort of put anything into it. But what they've done now on ChatGPT, and I'm sure others will follow, or some others may have already done it, is you can have connectors now where it connects to your Outlook, and you're getting the authorization of Microsoft that the information remains confidential. And ChatGPT is not storing any of that information on any servers. And I think for me, the fact that it's done officially through Microsoft and it's part of the Microsoft subscription and link with ChatGPT, and it talks about your confidential information and privacy. And Microsoft's got access to all of our private information anyway. If you use Microsoft as your email provider, it's sharing them with another trusted third party. And I think, I've made the decision that that's enough for me. I think on the basis of what I've looked into it, that's enough for me to be able to share that information with ChatGPT, but only under that paid business subscription. If you just have a pro subscription that you might be paying £160 a month for, that's not a business subscription. So you have to be very careful and make sure you're choosing the right subscription. If you're just using it as a consumer, but you're still paying the full whack, you're not protected by any of the caveats, I believe. It's only if you're on the business teams subscription. So just be careful with what you do and what risks that you're prepared to take, I think.
Greg, thank you very much for that. We'll come back to confidentiality, I'm sure, other ethical issues later on. Colm, can I turn to you, please? I know that you're deeply into this subject in Canada and also are able to view what's happening with your neighbours south of the border.
There's lots happening south of the border.
Well, I'm pleasantly for you, yes, but we do follow Canada, and you seem to be dealing with things pretty well. But let's leave aside the politics and let's get back to AI. What are you seeing?
Did I mean politics? Oh gosh, no. No, thanks, Tim. Well, I don't think I can say anything else. Greg said everything we need to know about AI, but I'll kind of talk about my kind of journey into it and a couple of things. And I would like to throw one thing into the ethics question, though, so we can think about it, is the idea of transparency. Particularly with clients and participants, and we can maybe talk about that a bit later. But so my kind of beginnings of this was in online dispute resolution, where many years ago, I did an LLM and did my thesis on online dispute resolution, which of course everybody said, no, you can't do that, because that was about 2002, I think. And it was like, no, you can't do that. And then it all changed, right? And the next stage, I think, is AI coming in. And my background is, although I've got kind of before law was history and economics, but also computer science, when computers were, bigger than my house and did nothing. So I've had this interest in tech going along because I think it is a very useful tool. And now we've just accelerated so much. When we think about it, I mean, ChatGPT, and I agree with Greg, that's the one I use as well, and I played with the others. I think it's probably the easiest to use. I like the fact that you can direct your data in a way, and I like the idea you can connect it. Although my comment, which is what I used to say about when I was presenting an ODR would be, we get really upset about email, but if you're sending unencrypted email, you may as well send a postcard, you know, because I mean, it really is completely open. But we have to be aware of it in this, particularly where the data is going in terms of training, because you don't want your data used by any GPT type AI to train, because that really is a breach of confidentiality. But it only really started, although AI, as we know, has been around for many, many years. We've only really started paying attention to it in the last, well, 4 years. I mean, it's hard to believe ChatGPT, I think, was 222, 223. It started really bubbling up, and now we're going, oh my God, where are we going? And I think I also agree with Greg, and I'm glad that I won't be practicing in more than 10 years, because I think the landscape is going to be completely different. Although I'm not sure mediators will be replaced, but we'll certainly be supplemented, and we certainly have to use it a lot. And I think we should be looking at that now. But before we jump into that, before people become worried about it, some of these things have been around a long time. And, we're talking about in personal injury, the idea of replacing mediators or judges or whatever with AI. But we've had algorithmic driven software for quite a while that has been used in personal injury in the US in particular. CyberSettle, and there's a Canadian one called SmartSettle. They've been around for a long time, and they haven't really come to the forefront because I think there's almost being an idea that if we're mediators, there's the personal touch, the same pushback we had on online dispute resolution we have with AI. But so I started playing with that, and in fact, I kind of decided how would you look at AI? How would you use it? And to me, the one area that I hope we get to talk about a lot is the idea of AI-assisted mediation, because I think there's a whole bunch of other things that I'll simplify. I think the slides were great. They gave us a fantastic overview of, what appears on the face of it to be terribly complex, but in reality isn't. You just have to spend a wee bit of time on it. Okay. So, I mean, I see using AI in things like case intake. You can set that up. Scheduling, we probably all use online calendars already, and you can, tie those in. The big thing, and I'm also an arbitrator, although my preferred kind of process is actually MedArb, a combination of processes. And summaries. I mean, it's just amazing what you can do. You get a 40-page summary in arbitration, and you can bring it up to, down to, 5 pages. Just make sure when you prompt it, you ask it to tell you where it got the information, or you'll have 5 pages of God knows where it came from. So, we can use it that way. And then I think, you can use it for documents, uploading, review them, all those things. We have some practice management programs that around there are moving towards using AI a fair amount. The one that I'm most familiar with is ADR Notable. Some of you may have seen that. It is, I think their UK office is in Belfast, maybe, but they're expanding into the AI field. I had a chat with the guy who runs it, Gary Dorver, a while ago, actually 2 weeks ago in Vancouver, and we were talking about where they're going. So you can use it for dealing with documents. And in Canada, in mediations, we have the lawyers usually prepare a mediation brief. Brief we would like, brief we rarely get. But so we have that, and then that's exchanged between the lawyers and also given to the mediator. And some of them are great, and some of them are not so great. So you can use ChatGPT to analyze them for you, to summarize them. Often, unfortunately, the types of mediation briefs we get tend to be based on pleadings, which of course is just repeating what everybody knows already. And so it's nice to pull that out and see where we're at on the idea of interests and the positions to interests. So the document part of it to me is an amazing time saver. And I started playing with this to see if I could do that. And then there's the AI-assisted mediation, which is a completely different thing. I see the administrative side of using AI, and then the almost practice side, which is the forward-facing side of it, where you can generate proposals, analyze the dialogue, and really help us move the parties and help them, come to resolution. Going back for a sec to the documents area, in cases where you have a lot of medical evidence, the ability of ChatGPT to summarize is astonishing. I don't do an awful lot of that, but I keep looking at what people are doing. And one of the areas I do is in wills and estates. And often that focuses on capacity, particularly if the will's been changed. And one of the things I found amazing is how you can go into complex medical files and pull out all the information you need, in a tiny percentage of the time you would have to do it. Now, the one thing that I'm sure we all know now is the prompting is the key to this. I mean, it is a conversation, it's not a search engine. But so I found it brilliant for that. So it can help you generate proposals. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of growth towards what Greg was talking about, where, mediators would be maybe shoved aside a wee bit, although I'm hoping not, to allow the technology to do it. But you can also use it for after the mediation. You can use it for surveys, evaluation. There's all kinds of survey programs out there. If you're looking for feedback, it's a good way of getting it. Sometimes we may not want it, but it's a good way of getting it. So you can use AI for that. You can use it for basic practice things, invoicing. Now, there's a lot of practice management programs that you might want to use instead, but you can set that up. One of the other really interesting areas for those of us in mediation, most mediators in North America tend to be in small groups or sole practitioners. And, you're competing in a market that is very similar to the one that's shown by CEDAR's, mediation audits. A very similar market in Canada anyway. And so marketing is always a pain for most of us. We don't like doing it. We want to mediate, not market. And we're a bit leery of trying to sell our services when we know data to back it up. But marketing is something you can do. So for example, I'm just doing a revamp of my website because it's really old and dated. And, I asked ChatGPT to go out and look at similar experience range type mediators websites, analyze them, tell me what's better and where mine's better and what I should do to fix it. And it was astonishing. Again, I mean, astonish is actually the word I use, and I'm not easily astonished, but it was. It really did pull out the ones I would have looked at and analyze them, but did it in a tiny amount of time. You can also generate your marketing, newsletter, survey, all that kind of thing. And that's where its drafting skills come in. You can do a first draft of a newsletter or a first draft of an article. And before you do that, you might want to do a wee bit of training on the AI. And as Greg said in the email, it follows his style. So one of the things you probably want to do is make sure that it does follow your style. And the easy way of doing that is to upload a number of articles that you've written and then tell it, going forward, I want you to write stuff following those styles. So you can personalize it. And if you want to see what you're doing, you can use programs like Grammarly, which will analyze it for you and also tell you what looks like AI, where you'll find that a lot of your writing, even if it isn't AI, looks like AI or could be AI generated. So I use it a lot for that. I write for a blog. I'm not as far ahead as Greg is in this, but I write for a legal blog, and I do that for my initial drafts because they're always on ADR topics. So I think there's a wide range of practice themes and topics that we can cover, and we can cover it really well, and we're using it. I mean, if you look on your Adobe, you will see that it offers you AI analysis of documents. If you look at PowerPoint, it'll offer to help you with design. And then you've got programs like Canva, which are great for doing slides and all those kind of things. So, there's a whole bunch of things here. I think it is important to spend a bunch of time thinking about it, and we may or may not have the time. But there are a couple of things I'd like to talk about, and we'll get into it further, but you have to be realistic in your expectations. Even though I might be completely in awe, you still have to be realistic. So some of the kind of feedback I've got from some of the webinars I've run have been, oh my goodness, I don't like this because AI will replace me. Well, not in the immediate future, I don't think, unless we suddenly jump into the next level of AI, in which case we're all done for. But AI will certainly change how we do it, right? So you need to reframe that, as you would with clients, into, well, how can I use it? Not, oh my God, I want to leave it alone, or don't touch it. There's also this, I think, myth that you need to be technical. Now, I think we will soon see a duty of technical competence for ADR professionals. And part of that will be AI, much as we have other ethical requirements. But you don't need to be. You just need to think a wee bit about workflows and how you'd use AI. You don't have to know how to program. In fact, one of the things I did is I took actually the Oxford AI certificate program, which is a fantastic program. Now, the programming part of it was miles ahead of me, but the kind of way it was put together was helpful. People think it's very expensive. Well, it's not. Meaning the business version of ChatGPT is relatively inexpensive. And that's something else to be really aware of. If you're using the free version, your data is being used for training, and you don't want that. So I think it's really incumbent on us to have the professional version. And the other thing is, we have this idea, probably from watching too many films with robots in it, that, it's perfect. And it's not. It actually learns though, so it improves with use and feedback. And one of the really exciting things, and I'll end up then, we can move on, is in the use of AI agents. And not just AI, not just chatbots. When you go on somebody's website and this annoying little thing comes up and it doesn't actually tell you what you want, but it comes more or less close to it. I mean, they're very rigid, right? They don't learn, they're reactive. But they're great for fully defined tasks. So, for example, you might have your frequently asked questions set up that way, although I prefer to do it slightly differently. The big difference between that and the kind of agent idea is the context awareness. It doesn't think, but it does show reasoning and judgment in answering questions. It can be quite proactive. It learns as it goes along, and it has the ability to analyze complexity, which chatbots don't. And I can see that being a real plus for us, particularly in marketing and in taking away, somebody calling you or sending you an email looking for very basic information. So there's lots of stuff there, and we could probably spend a lot of time on it. LM Notebook is great. I absolutely agree with that. I think there are others around, but you might want to play with them before you decide to commit to it. The ethics side of it is really important. So it can provide you, as long as you work that out, it can provide you with a lot. But think about what you're looking for. I mean, what we do is based on client trust to a really, high level. And so when we're using AI, we want to make sure we've client buy-in. That's what I really meant by transparency. But it can give you a competitive edge. And it's trite to say, well, mediators who use AI will do better than mediators who don't. But the reality is that's true. And we're going to have to move to whether we like it or not. And lawyers are ahead of us, generally speaking, in the use of more bespoke software. So I just find it very exciting to work in. And, again, I'm not to the stage Greg's at, but I started using it in training as well to run simulations. And I found that was really terrific, because one of the problems, I think, with ADR training is you get to do role plays, you get to do various things, but if you don't use your skills, then you lose them very quickly. So by having simulations, and I give people who take my course access to it afterwards, they basically can continue to refine skills and have the GPT play different roles, mediator, parties. It'll give you feedback if you prompt it right too. So there's a lot to be looked at from our perspective as ADR professionals or lawyers. And also a point I don't think we look at enough is party use. So from that point of view, you might want to look at how are you sending the message to parties that if they're going to use AI, that you kind of like to know about it and how they're using it, right? The idea of bringing AI into the mediation room is quite different than the idea of using AI in your practice generally. So with that, I will stop and let somebody else talk about it rather than jumping into black boxes and scaring us all. So thank you.
Colm, that's fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so much. You covered a huge amount of ground there. And I want to come back to this question of confidentiality, partly because we've had another question about it. And I think the question reflects some of my early thoughts about AI, which is, I'd really like to get involved in this, but my client data can't go anywhere near that. So it's completely off limits. And that's kind of held me back for a while, but I'm starting to get used to the fact that, that there are safeguards coming into place. So that's a bit of context for this question from Maya. And I think maybe referring to something Greg said, but perhaps Colm, you could address this. The question is this: is case information, pleadings without prejudice reports, uploaded into ChatGPT for mediation, isn't that a breach of confidentiality? So there's a specific question, which could be from a litigator or a mediator. That data is going into it. So isn't that scary? Are you going to be up before the SRA or the Law Society or whatever? How is that being dealt with now?
That's a great question, and I think it's still a question in many ways. Well, the first way you deal with it is make sure you're not using a kind of a AI that isn't a business use AI. I mean, in Europe at least, there's far better data protection than in North America. Our main concern, for example, is where's our data being stored? Because we, quite frankly, even before the changes, not politics, of course, in the US, we did not want our data in the US because different laws. So, you want to know where your data is stored. If you're dealing with something like Microsoft, you can probably be more or less confident that it is remaining confidential. You might, but I think in those cases, you really need to think it out and then decide, are you going to or talk to your clients about stuff like that? Is there certain information you don't want and to ever be in an AI? I'm inclined to kind of look forward to the idea that we can put more or less anything into it as long as we have safeguards. Now, that's the magic question, of course, because nobody can agree on rules and safeguards, and it's kind of the Wild West out there. But at the very least, if you're integrating it, as Greg said, you integrate it into something that, isn't is a world standard that you can be pretty sure, more or less, that you're going to have it protected. I think we need to look at making sure we know where the data goes, making sure if it's used in training, because we don't want that, because otherwise your confidential information will go out. But I think we also need to look at what kind of guidance are we getting from professional organizations. And I found in looking at it, because I'm part of a group trying to develop some standards, is we really need standards because we really haven't thought it out fully in a comprehensive way. So for example, we have different ADR groups have different rules. And I mean, the Chartered Institute's got some helpful stuff, and so do other groups, but I don't think they really deal with all the issues. So it's an ongoing debate. And actually, I'd really like to hear what Greg has to say on that. So I'll toss it over to him. And every other question I'll toss over to him as well. But anyway, we'll start with that one.
Greg, have a go at that, and I'll make some comments also.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it really, Colm, but I think, I'm not a lawyer. So I'm someone who sort of asks other people for guidance on the law. I've made the decision that the information that I'm putting into ChatGPT at the moment is safe to do so because of this world trusted status that you referred to them. I'm linking Microsoft with it. HubSpot is linked with ChatGPT through official channels. Canva is linked through ChatGPT through official channels. There's a range of apps that you can link to it, and the authorization comes from Microsoft to access that information. So I think that's pretty solid in itself. I wouldn't have dreamed of doing it without that.
And Greg, let me just jump in there if I may, because I I was looking at my Microsoft Office 365, and I talked to the provider about it, and because I was nervous of using Copilot, and they were saying, look, if you've got the business version and you're paying for that, then it is closed, and your information is going into Copilot. But it's not going into anywhere different than it already is. It's closed within your system. And I've been looking at getting the reassurances on that, because that gave me a lot of comfort.
Yeah, it's a business tool that's associated with your wider package of goods that you're buying from Microsoft.
Yeah. Fraught with difficulty, though, because where is the data going, as Colm has said, and we got clients who are pretty hot on the data not leaving the jurisdiction, and there's a heavy onus on us to check these things out. I was interested to note that the American Arbitration Association have been doing quite a lot of work on AI, and they found out that their arbitrators were using ChatGPT, and they arranged for them to use a product available over there called ClearBrief. And this is actually integrated within Microsoft Word, and it stops the hallucinatory citations coming up, which have been a problem well reported. But generally, it's a closed system, and when they produce information, they're going back to source. The other thing I've come across, which I think is really interesting, is something which is going to come, I believe, is going to be made publicly available soon, called the anomalizer. That is on the basis that you cannot, the author of this system says he cannot comply with 10 private rules regarding privacy around the globe. And I think 10 is probably an understatement. So his approach is to take the confidentiality out of the document. And he's doing that by using software which replaces the name of the person, John Smith, say, with person one. And his company of John Smith Limited is company one, and the thing is trained to go through the document and to give those replacements. Then you put it into your AI program with other usual safeguards, and when you bring it out, you can then reverse the process, and so the output you get. And I think that's a very interesting development. These things are moving all the time. But sorry, did you want to?
Sorry, just on that point as well. I mean, we do a lot of arbitration for travel disputes, and I was asked by a travel company yesterday, one of the big boys, have I given any training to the arbitrators about identifying AI generated images? And what they've found, two things are happening in travel claims at the moment. One of them is that consumers are using AI to draft their claim. But they're not sense checking it, and it's coming up with, we've seen them. It's referring to housing acts and things like that, when they're disputing whether the food quality was good enough in a hotel in Spain. And the other thing that they're doing is they're using AI, so things like Nano Banana from on Gemini, to actually doctor images taken on holiday. So you could, for example, you could put a picture of you and your partner sitting at a table in the restaurant and put a rat in it, and it looks like there's a rat on the table. And we're starting to see consumers now using AI to generate things to enhance their claim, but they're actually using AI. So now I've got to think about, well, as a provider of arbitration services, how can I make the arbitrators aware of that, or do we need to use some sort of technology that helps us to identify when something's AI generated? So there's all sorts of stuff going on. It's really hard to keep up with everything.
Yeah, Greg, thank you for that. Phil, I'm going to turn to you, because I know you've looked at one or two of these things, both in the past and more recently. So can I give you the floor, please?
Thanks, Tim. Talking about the past, I'm going to look at decision trees, and I found some slides from some training I did for a well-known defendant firm in 2018, and even older still, an article I wrote for PI Focus magazine in 2009 about decision trees. Now, decision trees you can use for simple things like, for example, predicting the probability of Everton winning their next 3 matches. and the first one of them is away to Man United, so that's probably 70%, and then they're home to Newcastle and away to Bournemouth. So as I said, 50% chance of winning those 2 games. If you calculate all that, it's 17.5% chance that they'll win all 3. So I'll be down to the bookies a bit later.
You're
But
hallucinating.
But that's a mathematical formula which you can do in pen and paper. You multiply the 3 together, or if you're more sophisticated, you can use an Excel spreadsheet. But now, of course, there are programs available to do the analysis for you with some AI. For example, there's epiroto.com, which is one example. Now, the legal, and I'm talking, if you replace the Everton's next 3 matches with will I win on liability, will I win on causation, and then will I get my high valuation of the damages in this claim, if you put those 3 factors in, you have to still provide your own legal analysis. There's no AI coming in to give you that analysis. So it's your legal skill is still entirely central to the process. And if your legal skill is no good, then the outcome won't be any good either. So it's utterly dependent on that. But with these programs, you can outline the issue, tell them what you consider the chance of liability, what you consider the chance of causation, success, etc. You put all those in, and it will come out with something which you can share with your client if you're advising a client, or with counsel or whatever, and you can tailor it for the target audience. So it can have a greater degree of specificity and detail. Or it can simply be, if you want to tell your client, you can say you have got an 18% chance of winning £50,000, and it can bring it down to that. Now, another system. Now, this, I think it sounds similar to what Greg was talking about earlier with his Medi, which I think is your private chat GPT, Greg, if I heard it correctly. There's an RPS negotiation and mediation coach designed by John Landy, a professor in law in the United States, has a similar thing. He has trained that model in the way he mediates and his mediation abilities, and you can put the information there. You can tell it what your dispute is. You can tell it what the disputes, which essentially a court will have to determine. You can tell it what you think the chances are, and it will come out with the information similar, perhaps less graphically well designed, but in simple format for you. And it can give you additional matters. So, for example, intangible benefits. It might be that it's causing a huge distress because of the delay in taking this case to court. You can factor that in, and the program will give some ideas about how you can resolve that, and how you can factor that into what it will come out with, which is the expected court outcome. And that is not a prediction of what the result will be. It is an average of all the possibilities and takes out the one that's statistically probably most likely, but it's not a prediction. And it's all founded on your analysis and your legal skill in the first place. So that's decision trees, which, as I say, have been around for years, but are now, with AI assistance, being almost more user friendly. So I don't know if we'll see any of those being used in mediations. As far as I say, I've never seen them used by anybody in one of my mediations. And as I say, I've been banging on about it since 2009.
Thanks very much for that, Phil. Do invite any questions. We've been just had the one question so far, but happy to take any now at the end. Tom, you're going to?
Yeah. Just going back to what Phil said about the John Landy stuff. I mean, you can take the the negotiation mediation code, the RPS GPT, into GPT, so you can actually set it up, and it is free. So it's well worth taking a look at, because if you want to, you could give your clients access so they could learn about mediation, and it is, it's obviously now all voice activated as well. I've seen a demonstration of it that's actually the other day, that it's pretty impressive once you set it up. So I think that's a good thing for helping clients prepare as well.
Yeah, a similar thing, Colm, carried out by the American Arbitration Association. They've now got a chat book for what we would call litigants in person going through an arbitration. So that they're in a foreign place, a foreign language as far as their day-to-day life is concerned. How do they deal with this, particularly if they don't have a lawyer? And they could just chat to the book in the same way as they can to the John Landy's coach or Greg's Mediation. You chat, you ask questions, and it answers. It's probably more that one of the problems there I see is the people asking the questions are in fact relying on the answers. And going back to the advice which you've touched on, one of the things you should never do with AI is to rely on it blindly. And I really like the idea of the analogy of the bright intern who can go off and do a pile of work, save you an awful lot of time, but you're not going to send that out to the client without checking it very carefully and going through it. So that's where you come back to transparency and competence, which I like what you said about that, Colm. I think we're not far away from the days when a mediator will need to say that they are competent in basic AI issues, if only to know what the parties are doing and to make sure that the mediation is protected in these situations.
Then can I put a final call out for questions? Sorry, just bearing in mind the time from the audience.
Yes, we're anxious to deal with your questions if you have them. I'll go ahead with the horror story that I was hearing about a family mediation, or a situation within family mediation where, again, a lot of people don't have legal representation, and parties are making free use of AI, but query with knowledge of the safeguards or not. Is the personal data going in there? Are the bank records going in there? What information is going in? And it's one thing if as a litigant in person you decide to put your own information in there, but if you're putting that of another person, that's quite something else. How does a mediator deal with that problem if it lands up with you halfway through a mediation? So I think one of the things you said, Greg, about the end of your slide there was that there's a fascination and excitement about the possibilities of this tool, but there's also the downside as well. And I think Richard Susskind said a chainsaw is a very useful device in the hands of a well-trained lumberjack, rather different in the hands of someone who wants to cause some damage to people or property. Okay, well, we seem to be heading towards the top of the hour. I hope that our discussion today has provided food for thought. One thing I did want to recommend, we've not mentioned so far, is Richard Suskind's book, How to Think About AI, a guide for the perplexed. Greg, I saw you mention it on social media the other day. I'm a great Suskind follower, but I think some really useful stuff in there, and I do think it's worth emphasizing that we should be dispelling the myth you need to be a techie to get into this subject. This is affecting all of us, our lives and our work, and we have a duty to get involved. And just to end on a note regarding the ethics, which I think is terribly important, and that is as practitioners, as ordinary day-to-day practitioners, we should be getting involved in these discussions and where the safeguards are, because if we don't, big tech companies will come along and say we're doing that work, and they will set the rules. And it's no good bleating if we don't like them, if we've sat quietly during this time of development. So I think there's some kind of moral, civic, professional responsibility on us as well to get involved with the subject, which is affecting us all in so many ways. So we've come to 1 minute before the end, and all that remains is for me to thank very much Greg for your input, Greg for Colm for getting out a little early this morning to be with us. I think it's probably a quarter of a century ago since you and I first crossed paths. It's great to see you. Thank you for coming. And MEDARB is something I've been meaning to ask you about for years, and I'm really getting close to the time when I'm going to say let's have a conversation about that, because we don't know much about it in this jurisdiction.
Yeah, well, happy to chat about that. And thank you very much for the opportunity. The hour flew by. I probably said too much, but it was interesting to hear what Greg was saying, because I see that as very similar to the paths we all need to go down.
Yeah. With that, thank you all very much and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.